The Council had always believed itself untouchable. For generations, it had ruled over countless star systems, setting laws, regulating trade, and arbitrating conflicts. Its members were not just leaders. They were symbols of wisdom, power, and order. And yet, on this day, that sense of control began to slip. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. Frontier stations, tiny outposts at the edges of known space, began sending fragmented reports. The messages were short, sometimes garbled by distance, but the underlying pattern was clear. Something was moving, something big. The transmissions spoke of strange vessels, numbers far exceeding anything previously recorded, moving with speed and coordination that defied expectation. When the first report arrived at the council chambers, it was dismissed. The council members, a group of beings from various worlds, leaned back in their chairs, exchanging skeptical glances. Human activity, one said with a scoff. Those scattered colonies are still recovering from centuries of isolation. They can barely defend themselves, let alone assemble a fleet. Another nodded, perhaps some exaggeration from the frontier. Communications often distort the truth. Let us not waste our time chasing shadows. But one observer remained uneasy. He had spent decades at the fringes, watching humanity grow, adapt, and survive under circumstances that would have destroyed most other species. He knew the humans better than most, and understood their reputation for persistence. Unlike the Council, which measured everything in political influence and technological advantage, he measured it in resilience and unpredictability, and that, he feared, might be their greatest strength. He stood and presented his findings, voice steady but urgent. The sensors are real. I've double-checked the coordinates. The humans are organizing something large, much larger than any single colony could manage. They are moving toward our sector, and I fear they are not coming for diplomacy. The Council murmured, but the tone was dismissive. Fear is a poor advisor, another member said. Let us not let frontier tailies cloud our judgment. If these humans were capable of what you suggest, we would have noticed long ago. Yet, as the day passed, more reports arrived. They were not just from the frontier stations. Merchant vessels, returning from routine trade runs, spoke of sightings, long lines of ships moving in formation, communication signals unusually coordinated, weapons tests that lit up entire quadrants. The evidence was mounting, and the observers? Warnings became harder to ignore. By evening, the Council convened an emergency session. The room, usually filled with calm, measured discussion, was tense. Screens flickered with live feeds from distant systems, showing the slow but steady advance of the human fleets. The images were small, distant dots to the untrained eye, but the analysts spoke in hushed tones. If these numbers are accurate, no single council fleet could match them, one whispered. A senior member, who had spent decades negotiating interstellar treaties, leaned forward. Are you suggesting humanity has somehow unified its colonies into a single force? That they've developed new technology we haven't detected? The observer nodded. Exactly. They've been underestimated for too long. While we assumed division and stagnation, they were quietly preparing, adapting, and learning. They've taken every setback and turned it into strength. And now, they are coming for a reason we cannot yet fully understand. The room fell silent. This was not the casual skepticism of before. Something in the air had changed. Even those who had dismissed the warnings could feel the weight of possibility pressing down on them. The Council, for all its experience and wisdom, had never faced a threat like this. Not in living memory. Outside the chambers, the galaxy went on as usual. Stars twinkled, planets rotated, and life continued in its endless cycle. Traders carried goods, families argued over trivial matters, and soldiers trained for threats that were always theoretical. No one outside the council's inner circle yet realized the storm approaching. But at the edges, in the quiet void of space, sensors and observers were already noting patterns, and they all pointed in one direction. The humans were coming, and they were coming with purpose. One analyst, known for her sharp mind and blunt assessments, finally spoke. "We are making a mistake by underestimating them. We've relied on historical data, and history has often painted humans as unpredictable but weak. That assumption is no longer safe. Their persistence, their ability to adapt, has grown into something formidable, something we cannot ignore." A heated debate broke out. Some members argued that diplomacy should still be attempted, that perhaps the humans had grievances that could be addressed without conflict. Others countered that the humans' actions suggested preparation for war, and that the council must ready its defenses immediately. Voices rose, tempers flared, and for the first time, the veneer of unity within the council cracked. Meanwhile, in the quiet of space, small human scouts continued their approach. They were fast, silent, and efficient. Their movements were not chaotic. They were deliberate, calculated, almost ceremonial in precision. The observer watched the data streams, his unease growing. "They are not just a fleet," he muttered. "This is strategy. This is intent. They know exactly what they are doing." Reports began to indicate something even more alarming. The humans were testing systems the council had thought superior. Long-range weapons were being calibrated with accuracy that exceeded current council standards. Propulsion systems allowed for faster deployment and tighter formations. Communication arrays operated across vast distances with minimal delay. Every report seemed to reveal a hidden capability, a secret preparation the council had never imagined. And then came the first undeniable proof. A live feed from a forward observation post showed a small human cruiser approaching a neutral planet. Sensors confirmed the craft was equipped with advanced shielding and weaponry. The post attempted contact following protocol, but the cruiser did not respond. Instead, it executed a flawless maneuver, demonstrating precision and control far beyond the council's expectations. The council froze, not in anger, not in indecision, but in fear. Fear was not a feeling they were accustomed to in the halls of power. It was new, unfamiliar, and deeply unsettling. For decades, they had been the arbiters of order, the judges of disputes, the undisputed rulers of their region. And now, they realized, they might be powerless. Hours passed. The council debated endlessly, but no resolution emerged. Some proposed evacuation plans, others suggested defensive posturing. Yet in every proposal, there was an underlying truth they could not ignore. Humanity had been underestimated, and that mistake, they all sensed, might prove catastrophic. The observer, weary but resolute, finally rose again. "We cannot wait for proof of attack. By the time we react, it may be too late. They are coming not as a disorganized colony, but as a unified force. We have seen their capacity for adaptation, their patience, their endurance. This is not a warning to be ignored." Silence followed. The council, for the first time, truly understood the gravity of the situation. The humans were no longer the scattered, inconsequential colonies they had always dismissed. They were a force of nature, emerging quietly, steadily, and now, inevitably. And in that silence, the first seeds of fear took root. Not the panic of unpreparedness, but a deep, bone-chilling awareness that the old order might be ending. The council had ruled the stars for generations, but the humans were coming not as diplomats, not as traitors, but as something entirely different. The day ended with the council in turmoil. Lights flickered over the vast chambers, holographic displays of approaching fleets, casting eerie shadows on the faces of those who had once believed themselves untouchable. Outside, in the quiet of space, human ships continued their advance, silent and relentless. And somewhere in the observer's heart, a grim certainty settled. The era of underestimating humanity was over, and the galaxy would never be the same again. By nightfall, no one slept. The council members, for the first time in recorded history, understood the meaning of fear, not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible, looming presence that hung over every decision, every thought, every plan. The humans were coming, and when they arrived, the council would have no illusions left. The council could no longer ignore the reports. Humanity, once considered fragmented and weak, was proving to be something far beyond their expectations. Analysts scrambled to understand the scale of what was approaching. The images and readings were beginning to reveal a truth that made even the most confident council members uneasy. The first real shock came when a recon ship returned from a border system. The crew had been tasked with counting the human ships, confirming their strength, and observing their technology from a safe distance. They had expected a few dozen cruisers, maybe a few carriers at most. What they reported instead made every council member lean forward in disbelief. There were hundreds of ships moving in perfect formations. The cruisers were equipped with weapon systems that the council had considered experimental, far beyond what any human colony was supposed to possess. Even more startling was the coordination, the way these ships moved together, as if guided by a single mind. The lead analyst struggled to keep her voice steady. "We've never seen anything like this. Their fleet is organized, disciplined, and adaptive. They've clearly been preparing for something, but what and for how long, we do not know. Our previous intelligence underestimated them by decades." A murmur ran through the council chambers. Many had assumed that human colonies were isolated, often struggling to maintain basic infrastructure. They had been regarded as clever survivors. Yes, but nothing more. Now, all of that assumption was crumbling. "Are we certain these ratings are accurate?" One member asked, his tone defensive. Could this be a miscalculation? Perhaps a large natural phenomenon confused our sensors? The analyst shook her head. "We've double-checked everything. Multiple sensor arrays confirm the numbers. The weapon tests, the propulsion patterns, they are deliberate. This is not a coincidence or an error. Humanity has done what we believed. Impossible. It has unified and advanced in secret." Some members of the council refused to show fear. They argued that humans might be bluffing, that their approach could be a negotiation tactic or a show of force meant to scare rather than destroy. But even as they argued, more data arrived. Another recon mission reported human supply chains stretching across space, with logistics operations that suggested long-term planning. They were not merely a fleet moving outward. They were an entire system on the move, and nothing in the council's experience could match it. A senior member, once proud of decades of diplomatic victories, leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "If these humans can organize and move like this, then everything we assumed about them was wrong. They are not just fighters. They are strategists, engineers, and planners. They have overcome limitations that we considered insurmountable. Room fell silent. For the first time, fear was not whispered, it was palpable. The council members, used to negotiating disputes and controlling vast territories, felt small and unprepared. Their previous confidence had vanished, replaced by the cold realization that they were facing a force unlike any they had ever encountered. Outside the council chambers, life continued as usual. Planets rotated in their orbits, markets bustled with trade, and ordinary citizens went about their lives. Yet, in the vast reaches of space, humanity's preparations were moving forward. Advanced scouts charted precise courses. Test maneuvers were executed with flawless accuracy, and communication signals allowed for coordination that the Council could barely comprehend. The Council's military advisors tried to reassure the members, but their words rang hollow. Even if we muster our fleets, we are at a technological disadvantage. Their weapons are faster, more accurate, and more versatile than anything we can field, one of them admitted. If they intend conflict, we will be lucky to survive the first engagement. A heated argument broke out. Some council members insisted on sending diplomats, hoping that the humans could be reasoned with. Others argued that such a move would be foolish, that diplomacy would be seen as weakness and invite immediate attack. Voices rose, frustration mounted, and old rivalries within the council resurfaced. What had once been an image of unity now looked fragile, almost brittle. Meanwhile, intelligence reports revealed something even more troubling. Humans had developed technologies that allowed them to move faster than council warships without detection. Their long-range weapons were precise enough to disable targets without exposing themselves to counterattack. They were not only strong, they were smart, adaptive, and patient. The observer, who had warned the council from the beginning, spoke again. Do not mistake restraint for weakness. Humans have waited, learned, and adapted. They are not reckless, and they are not naive. Every action we have recorded shows planning, preparation, and foresight. They are coming with purpose, and we must not assume we can outthink them. The council struggled to digest this. Fear, once an abstract concept, had taken shape in front of their eyes. The humans had done what many had considered impossible. They had unified despite distance, developed advanced technology, and maintained secrecy. And now they were approaching with clarity of mission. As night fell over the council chambers, the tension only deepened. Communications with the frontier stations reported human movements across multiple sectors. Fleets were converging, resources were being mobilized, and every report hinted at an intelligence that surpassed council expectations. There was no chaos in their preparation, only careful, deliberate organization. A quiet voice broke the tension. We have underestimated them. Every calculation, every assumption we made about their capabilities was flawed. If we continue to treat them as weak, we are inviting disaster. The room fell silent once more. Some members nodded, others stared at the screens, unwilling to speak. For the first time, the council recognized that humanity was no longer a minor concern. They were facing a power that had grown quietly, invisibly, and now, inevitably. Days passed, and the reports continued to arrive. Each new message brought confirmation. Humans were not just a fleet. They were an organized, technologically superior force capable of precision strikes and strategic planning on a scale the council had never imagined. Analysts began to document their capabilities in detail, hoping to find any weakness, but the more they learned, the clearer it became. Humanity had transformed into something formidable, something unstoppable. The council's internal divisions deepened. Some argued for immediate evacuation of vulnerable systems, while others insisted on consolidating defenses around the core sectors. Both sides were haunted by the same thought. No matter what measures were taken, humanity had already surpassed. Their understanding, their strategy, their unity, and their technological advancements had made them unpredictable in a way that terrified even the most seasoned council members. And then came the first direct observation of human behavior. A small human ship, detected near a neutral system, executed a series of maneuvers that disabled automated defenses without firing a shot. The observers described it as elegant, efficient, and nearly flawless. The humans were not just attacking, they were demonstrating control over every variable, every situation, every challenge they encountered. The council members stared at the reports, realizing that what they were seeing was not merely a display of strength, it was a message. Humanity was precise, disciplined, and patient. They were not impulsive, nor were they careless. Every action was calculated, every movement deliberate. Fear turned to respect, grudging, and silent. The council had spent generations believing themselves unchallenged. They had negotiated, manipulated, and controlled entire sectors of the galaxy without significant opposition. And yet, here were humans, proving that power was not always obvious, that strength could be hidden, and that patience could become an unstoppable force dot by the end of the second week. The council could no longer maintain its composure. The humans were too close, too powerful, and too organized to be ignored. Plans were drafted, fleets prepared, and defenses bolstered, but all of it was tinged with the knowledge that the humans might not need to attack to achieve their goals. The council had underestimated them for too long, and now the consequences of that mistake were becoming painfully clear in the quiet moments. When the council members were alone, a shared thought lingered in every mind. They had faced challenges before, but never like this. Humanity had moved from being dismissed as weak and fragmented to becoming a force that could not be contained, a presence that demanded attention, and a power that inspired both fear and awe. And in that realization lay the truth they could not escape. The era of underestimating humanity was over. The humans were no longer a minor concern. They were the challenge the galaxy had not anticipated, and the council, for all its wisdom and experience, had no clear path to stop them. The observer, standing at the edge of the council chambers, watched the reports continue to flow. He felt a strange mixture of fear and admiration. "They've done what we thought impossible," he whispered to himself. "They've become the one thing we could not predict." Outside, in the vastness of space, human ships continued their silent, unstoppable advance. And for the council, the question was no longer whether humanity could strike. They already had proven that possibility. The question was whether the galaxy could survive, facing a force that had been underestimated for too long. The council had been watching the human fleets move across the galaxy for weeks. Every day brought new data, new evidence of strength, discipline, and planning that far surpassed any expectation. Yet, despite all the preparations, nothing prepared them for the message that arrived one morning, a single, calm, and clear transmission that reached the council's central communication hub. The council members gathered immediately, tension thick in the air. The transmission was unlike anything they had received before. It was not threatening in the way a war declaration might be. There was no anger, no aggression in the tone. Instead, it was controlled, deliberate, and undeniably final. Every word was carefully chosen, every pause measured. The lead communications officer replayed the message several times. "Attention all council members," the voice began, steady and precise. "Humanity has moved beyond the divisions that once defined it. We have unified for a single purpose: to ensure that no species in this galaxy continues to dominate, oppress, or exploit others without consequence. We are coming to correct the imbalance that has persisted for generations." A stunned silence followed. The council members looked at one another, unsure how to respond. For decades, they had believed themselves the guardians of order, the judges of disputes, the arbiters of law. And yet, here was a message that ignored negotiations, treaties, and tradition entirely. It was not a request. It was a statement of intent. One member, attempting to regain composure, finally spoke. "Are they threatening us?" The question hung in the room, though everyone knew the answer. The words had not been violent, yet the meaning was unmistakable. Humanity had made its position clear. It would not allow injustice, exploitation, or oppression to continue. The council was, in effect, on notice. Another council member, a veteran of countless interstellar conflicts, leaned forward. "They are not asking, they are stating. And their fleets, the reports are clear. They are capable. They are organized. And they are coming for a reason that may not be negotiable." The communication officer continued, playing the rest of the transmission. We do not seek war, but we will not be ignored. We have waited, we have observed, and we have learned. Those who have oppressed, exploited, or harmed others will find that humanity is no longer divided, no longer unprepared, and no longer hesitant. The choice is simple. Cease all oppressive actions, dismantle unjust systems, and submit to fair oversight or face the consequences of our intervention. Humanity will act with precision, fairness, and finality. There will be no warnings beyond this message. The words echoed through the council chambers. No one spoke immediately. Some stared at the glowing holographic displays, as though trying to see the fleets themselves through the words. Others rubbed their eyes, unwilling to accept the implications. The message was not just about military strength. It was about intent, about judgment, and about a kind of unstoppable force that could not be reasoned with in traditional ways. A quiet voice broke the silence. This is not a threat in the usual sense, it said. They are not angry. They are not impulsive. They are stating a fact. We have done wrong, and they intend to correct it. They are coming to enforce consequences, and they are prepared in every way. The council members shifted uneasily. Some began reviewing historical records, trying to find examples of humans acting in such a manner. They searched for past conflicts, past rebellions, past failures, trying to understand the nature of this species. But the more they looked, the clearer the pattern became. Humans had survived impossible odds, adapted to harsh conditions, and risen from near destruction time. And again, they had learned, evolved, and improved, often in ways that other species could not anticipate. Outside the council chambers, ordinary citizens continued their lives, unaware of the significance of the transmission. Children played in parks, merchants traded goods, and travelers moved from planet to planet. Yet in the silence of space, human ships continued their advance, each movement precise, disciplined, and honoring. The transmission had not been a warning. It had been a demonstration of clarity, purpose, and resolve. The council attempted to respond, of course. Messages were sent back, trying diplomacy, trying reason. But the humans did not reply to the attempts in the way the council expected. There were no hasty negotiations, no signs of hesitation. They simply continued their advance, their actions reflecting the intent expressed in the transmission. Every fleet movement, every sensor reading, every calculated maneuver reinforced the council's growing realization. Humanity was serious, precise, and fully prepared. A military advisor spoke up, frustration and fear evident in his voice. We can prepare our fleets, bolster our defenses, and attempt countermeasures, but their technology, coordination, and planning surpass anything we have ever faced. They are not acting recklessly. Every movement is deliberate, every strategy refined. If conflict occurs, we will not survive the first engagement. Some council members still hoped for a peaceful resolution, clinging to the belief that diplomacy could somehow succeed. They argued that the humans might be convinced to accept compromise, that their intent was not destruction but fairness. Others countered, insisting that the very nature of the transmission left no room for negotiation. Humans had made their position clear, and the council's past actions had already defined them as targets. The debate continued for hours, but the growing fear was visible on every face. Even the most experienced members, those who had faced rebellions, invasions, and crises, felt the weight of inevitability pressing down upon them. Humanity was no longer distant, uncoordinated, or underestimated. They were here, and the council was beginning to understand that waiting could only make things worse. Meanwhile, reconnaissance reports provided more insight into human behavior. Small human teams had been detected on distant planets, conducting surveys, testing defenses, and gathering data with astonishing efficiency. Every action was methodical, precise, and deliberate. There was no recklessness, no wasted effort. Humans had not only organized fleets, but had also prepared for every possible scenario the Council might attempt. A council member, usually calm and collected, finally spoke aloud the thought that had been growing in everyone's minds. We have underestimated them. Every assumption we made about their weakness, their division, and their lack of preparation has been proven wrong. They are not just a threat. They are a judgment, a force that we cannot outmaneuver with old strategies. Silence followed. The weight of that statement settled over the council chambers like a heavy fog. For the first time, the members understood that this was not just about power or technology. It was about resolve, intent, and the human capacity to act decisively when they had no reason to hesitate. As hours passed, the council began drafting contingency plans, but each option seemed flawed in the face of humanity's precision. Defensive. Fleets were organized, but analysts admitted they could be neutralized before making a meaningful impact. Evacuation plans were considered, yet no system could be safely moved fast enough. Diplomacy was attempted, but messages went unanswered. Humanity was not distracted by fear or negotiation. They were focused, disciplined, and moving toward their goal with calm inevitability. The council hall, once a place of confident discussion and authority, had become a chamber of unease. Members whispered in corners, reviewing data, questioning every assumption, and realizing the depth of their miscalculation. Humanity had transformed from a distant concern into an unstoppable force. The message they had sent had made one thing clear: the Council's power, its control, and its sense of security were illusions. And yet, even in the midst of fear, a strange admiration began to take root. Humans were not reckless conquerors or mindless aggressors. They were intelligent, strategic, and precise. Their actions demonstrated discipline, patience, and an unwillingness to accept injustice. Even as the Council feared what might come, they could not help but respect the clarity and determination that the humans displayed. The transmission was replayed again and again, each member absorbing its meaning more fully. Humans had come with purpose, but they had also come with fairness. They had chosen not to act impulsively, not to destroy without reason, but to address what they saw as a long-standing imbalance. The Council understood, perhaps for the first time, that they were facing a force shaped by principles rather than impulse, a force that combined intelligence, planning, and resolve in ways the galaxy had never seen before. By the end of the day, the Council had reached a reluctant consensus. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Their intent was clear, their preparation meticulous, and their capabilities unmatched. Any attempt to resist without understanding or adaptation would be catastrophic. The old strategies, the old assumptions, and the old sense of security were gone. Humanity had arrived, and the Council would have to face a reality that they had long ignored. The galaxy was no longer theirs to control, and the humans were here to ensure that truth could not be denied. The observer, who had warned the Council from the beginning, watched silently as the members began to grasp the scope of the situation. He felt a mixture of fear and awe. Humanity had made itself known, and the Council could no longer pretend that the species they had dismissed as weak was anything less than formidable. Outside, the Council had spent days analyzing every report, every transmission, and every sensor reading from the advancing human fleets. What they thought was a distant threat had grown into an undeniable reality. Humanity was no longer a possibility. They were here, approaching with precision, discipline, and unwavering intent. The Council had thought they were prepared, but now doubt and fear filled every chamber. Internal divisions within the Council began to surface. Some members argued that evacuation of the most vulnerable systems should begin immediately. They wanted to protect populations before the humans arrived, fearing that even a small misstep could lead to mass destruction. Others insisted that retreat would show weakness, that consolidating defenses around key systems was the only way to preserve authority. Debates grew heated. Voices that had once carried authority now clashed with suspicion and anger. Some council members accused others of underestimating the humans, while others accused their peers of overreacting and panicking unnecessarily. The room, usually a place of calm deliberation, had turned into a storm of tension. Meanwhile, human ships moved steadily through the sectors. They were silent, deliberate, and perfectly coordinated. Every sensor update reinforced the Council's growing unease. They had never faced an opponent who combined intelligence, strategy, and discipline in such a complete way. The humans were not only approaching, they were teaching a lesson in precision, patience, and planning. Reports from reconnaissance teams became increasingly alarming. Long-range scanners detected that humans had established temporary bases in previously neutral systems, preparing supply lines and testing planetary defenses with surgical accuracy. These were not random movements. They were rehearsals, exercises, and assessments designed to ensure total effectiveness when the time came. The Council had never encountered an opponent who treated preparation with such careful attention. One senior council member, usually confident and commanding, finally spoke aloud the thought that had been spreading like wildfire through the chambers. "We are not facing a fleet. We are facing a force that has learned from every failure, adapted to every challenge, and calculated every possible outcome. This is not a threat we can outthink using old methods." The words hung in the air. Even the most optimistic members could feel the weight of truth. The Council had relied on its historical advantage, assuming technology, tradition, and alliances would always keep them ahead. But the humans had proven that resilience, adaptation, and intelligence could outweigh all assumptions. As the debate continued, some council members quietly began contacting off-world allies. They requested additional fleets, mercenaries, and even private security forces. It was a desperate attempt to buy time, to create a buffer against a force that was already unmatched. Yet, even these reinforcements seemed insufficient. Reports showed that human ships could neutralize multiple targets simultaneously, coordinate attacks across vast distances, and move faster than any traditional fleet. Panic began to ripple through the Council's inner circles. Longtime advisors whispered about worst-case scenarios, imagining entire systems falling under human control before any defensive measure could be completed. Even those who had dismissed the threat initially began to accept that humanity was operating on a level they had never anticipated. The observer, who had warned the Council from the beginning, remained calm but vigilant. He had expected this moment, the point where the Council would finally recognize the full scale of human capability. "They are not reckless," he told a fellow member. "They do not act without purpose. Every maneuver, every observation, every advance is deliberate. If we are to survive this, we must understand them, not fear them." Some council members wanted to reach out to the humans, hoping for diplomacy, but even these attempts were met with uncertainty. The humans had already made their position clear. They would not tolerate oppression, exploitation, or injustice. Their message was precise, and their intent unwavering. Any attempt to negotiate without meeting their expectations risked being interpreted as weakness. Meanwhile, as human fleets moved closer, intelligence revealed another unsettling truth. The humans were not only coordinating their fleets, they were also sending specialized teams to observe key council systems. These teams were efficient, silent, and precise, mapping weaknesses and testing defensive measures without triggering alarms. It was a demonstration of capability and control, a reminder to the Council that humanity's approach was methodical and calculated. Fear and respect grew in equal measure. The Council members, who had always relied on history, tradition, and precedent, now faced a force that ignored all previous assumptions. Humanity was not predictable in the ways the Council understood. They had patience, discipline, and strategic vision. They were capable of decisions that combined morality, intelligence, and decisive action, a combination the Council had rarely encountered. Some members began proposing drastic measures. They suggested cutting communication with the outer colonies, isolating systems to prevent the humans from gaining intelligence, and activating defensive grids that had not been used for decades. Others argued that these measures might provoke the humans, showing weakness disguised as resistance. Arguments grew longer, more desperate, and more fragmented. Outside the council chambers, human fleets continued their advance. Reports indicated that they were already in positions that could control key sectors, and sensors showed movement patterns that suggested intelligence gathering beyond what had been previously assumed. Their strategy was simple: approach methodically, neutralize vulnerabilities, and maintain control without unnecessary violence. The Council tried to respond with traditional measures, mobilizing fleets, deploying automated defense systems, and activating old communication protocols. But every report indicated that these measures were insufficient. The humans anticipated defensive patterns, adapted to countermeasures, and executed actions with precision that rendered many defenses irrelevant. One council member, usually a voice of reason, could no longer hold back. We are not dealing with a normal fleet. We are dealing with intelligence, discipline, and intent combined. Every move they make proves that we have underestimated them for far too long. This is not a threat we can face with confidence. It is a force that demands respect, understanding, and careful response. Others nodded, their expressions grim. For the first time, the Council collectively realized that humanity was not simply a threat, they were a power that could redefine the rules of engagement in the galaxy. Their patience, their intelligence, and their unity made them unpredictable in ways the Council could not fully calculate. As the hours passed, divisions within the Council deepened. Some members wanted to hide, to retreat to the core systems, and hope for survival. Others insisted on consolidating power and resisting with every resource available. Yet all recognized one truth: humanity's advance could not be ignored, delayed, or outmaneuvered using traditional methods. In the observer's mind, a single thought remained constant: the humans had become a force of their own making, shaped by centuries of survival, adaptation, and ingenuity. They were not reckless, nor were they naive. They had calculated every risk, prepared for every scenario, and moved with a precision that demanded acknowledgement. By the end of the day, the Council had begun to crumble, not physically, but in confidence. Their authority, their sense of control, and their understanding of power were all being challenged. Humanity's methodical approach had exposed the Council's weaknesses, forcing them to confront truths they had long ignored: that intelligence, discipline, and unity could overcome even the most entrenched power structures. Reports continued to arrive, showing that humans were positioning themselves to control not just sectors, but entire systems. Their fleets moved without error, and every observation indicated that they had anticipated the Council's reactions. Fear, once a whisper, had grown into a constant presence, affecting every decision and every plan. The Council members, who had once believed in their untouchable authority, now faced the realization that they were not the dominant power they had assumed. Humanity had grown beyond their understanding, and their methodical, disciplined approach left little room for hope. Without adaptation. As night fell over the council chambers, the tension did not ease. Members whispered, reviewed data, and prepared contingencies. Yet each action was shadowed by the same thought: the humans were inevitable, precise, and unstoppable in their approach. Every report confirmed that the Council's assumptions had been flawed, every calculation incomplete, and every strategy insufficient. The observer, standing quietly at the edge of the chamber, watched the humans' progress with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "They are not here to destroy recklessly," he said softly. "They are here to correct what they see as wrong, and they will act with precision, patience, and finality. We must understand this if we hope to survive." Even as preparations continued, the Council could feel the weight of inevitability pressing down. Humanity was advancing, relentless and methodical. Their approach was not a simple military operation. It was an assertion of principle, intelligence, and purpose. The Council had faced crises before, but none had challenged their understanding of power, strategy, and control like this, dot by the ya. The moment had come. After weeks of warnings, calculations, and escalating tension, humanity finally arrived in the system. The Council, which had spent generations ruling with authority and confidence, now faced a reality it could no longer deny. Humans were here, moving with precision, discipline, and a calm that made every Council member uneasy. Reports streamed in from observation posts and reconnaissance satellites. Fleets that the Council had assumed were far away were suddenly visible in the outer sectors. They were massive, yet organized in a way that made them appear almost graceful. Ships moved in perfect formations, as if guided by a single thought, every maneuver deliberate and efficient. The Council's defenses, once considered formidable, suddenly felt inadequate. The first attempt to intercept the humans was made by the Council's defensive fleet. A squadron of cruisers launched from a nearby star system, hoping to block the humans' advance and test their capabilities. Within moments, however, it became clear that the humans were beyond comparison. The Council's ships tried to form a defensive barrier, but the humans anticipated every movement. They maneuvered around the cruisers with precision, disabling weapon systems without firing a shot that could harm the humans themselves. In the Council chambers, members watched the reports in disbelief. Some could not believe what they were seeing. "How is this possible?" One whispered. "We've never faced anyone capable of such control, such discipline." Another member, normally calm and analytical, could only shake their head. "They are not just powerful. They are intelligent, precise, and patient. Every action we observe proves it. This is beyond anything we prepared for." Meanwhile, humans sent messages through secure communication channels. These were not threats filled with anger or hostility. They were calm, measured statements. "Our goal is not destruction without reason. We seek resolution and balance. Systems that have acted unjustly or exploited others will be addressed. Compliance ensures protection. Resistance ensures correction." The Council's leaders realized the meaning behind the words. The humans were not acting out of impulse. They were acting with purpose, fairness, and control. Every decision, every maneuver, every communication reflected intelligence and strategic thinking. They were not a reckless invader. They were a force that enforced consequences without unnecessary destruction. As the humans moved closer, the Council tried to mount a defense. They activated automated defense systems, deployed additional fleets, and tried to coordinate countermeasures. Yet every attempt failed to meet the precision of the human forces. Automated turrets misfired or were disabled before engaging. Fleets could not maintain formations when humans bypassed defenses with minimal effort. The Council watched helplessly as their best-laid plans were rendered ineffective. Panic began to spread. Members whispered about the impossibility of resisting such coordination. Systems previously considered safe were now within the humans' operational range. The Council's control, once absolute, was crumbling. Every movement of the human fleet emphasized that the Council's understanding of power and defense was outdated, insufficient, and fundamentally flawed. Despite this, the humans acted with restraint. Even as Council ships were neutralized, there was no unnecessary destruction. Planets were left untouched. Civilian populations were not harmed. Humans focused solely on strategic objectives showing capability, maintaining order, and enforcing consequences without chaos. Their actions communicated a powerful message. They were not oppressors, nor were they reckless conquerors. They were enforcers of principle, and their reach was undeniable. In the council chambers, members began to grasp the scale of what they faced. Longtime advisors, military experts, and political leaders debated frantically. Some wanted to launch a counterattack, hoping to surprise the humans or stall their advance. Others argued that any attempt at resistance would be futile and would only bring harm to countless lives. The debate grew heated, voices rising in fear and frustration. But beneath every argument was the shared realization: the humans had arrived, and they were far beyond anything the council had prepared for. The first council members to suggest surrender were met with resistance. Pride, tradition, and the illusion of control made the idea difficult to accept. Yet, as humans advanced with calm efficiency, the inevitability became clear. Surrender was not about weakness, it was about survival. Continuing resistance would bring destruction, but compliance could preserve life, maintain order, and allow for negotiation on human terms. Across the galaxy, observers reported similar patterns. Human fleets moved not only with speed and precision, but also with intelligence and patience. They surveyed entire sectors, identifying weaknesses, bypassing strongholds, and positioning themselves to control the flow of space without unnecessary conflict. No detail was overlooked. Every movement seemed calculated to achieve maximum efficiency with minimal risk. The Council's attempts to communicate directly were met with measured responses. Humans repeated their terms calmly: cease oppressive actions, dismantle unjust systems, and submit to oversight or face consequences. There was no yelling, no aggression, no emotional outburst, only precision. And the Council knew that their old methods, their fleets, and their defenses were no match for such clarity of purpose. Fear now dominated the council chambers. Members who had once felt untouchable were shaken, not by firepower, but by intelligence, strategy, and discipline. Humanity had shown that strength was not only in technology or numbers, it was in planning, adaptation, and unwavering focus. One member spoke quietly, almost to themselves. We believed we controlled the galaxy. We believed we understood power. But this is something else entirely. They are not only stronger, they are smarter, faster, and more precise than anything we imagined. Others nodded, realizing the truth. Humanity was not a simple colony, a minor species, or a scattered collection of systems. They were a unified force, a species that had learned from adversity, adapted to every challenge, and moved with clarity and purpose. And now, they had arrived to demonstrate that they could enforce consequences on a scale the Council had never seen. The observer, who had warned the Council from the beginning, stood quietly, watching the data streams. He felt both awe and fear. "They are here," he said softly, "not to destroy recklessly, but to correct what they see as wrong. And everything they do is precise, controlled, and inevitable. We cannot hope to outfight them. We can only survive by understanding them." As the humans continued to advance, the Council began to consider compliance seriously. Orders were given to suspend defensive actions, reduce confrontations, and preserve lives wherever possible. Military leaders reluctantly agreed. Engaging the humans directly could only result in disaster. The focus shifted from resistance to preservation, and even then, uncertainty and fear dominated every plan. Meanwhile, human actions continued to reinforce their reputation. They bypassed unnecessary conflict, prioritized critical systems, and neutralized only what was necessary to achieve their objectives. Civilian populations, neutral worlds, and unarmed stations remained untouched. The humans demonstrated that their power was not recklessness, But intelligence guided by principle. Council members began to understand that fear alone could not guide them. They had to rethink strategy, priorities, and approach. Humanity had arrived, and the old methods of control, intimidation, and tradition were no longer sufficient. The Council faced a force that combined intelligence, discipline, and precision in a way they had never encountered before. For the first time, a sense of respect began to emerge alongside fear. Humans were formidable, yes, but they were also calculated and principled. They were not mindless aggressors. They were strategic, patient, and purposeful. Every action they took, every fleet movement, every communication reinforced the reality that this was a species operating at a level the Council could not match with old assumptions. As night fell over the Council chambers, members remained glued to the reports. Human fleets moved with calm efficiency, neutralizing threats without unnecessary destruction, and positioning themselves to assert control across the system. The Council, once confident and commanding, now felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The observer, watching silently, knew that history had shifted. Humans had shown that intelligence, discipline, and purpose could outweigh numbers, technology, and tradition. The Council could no longer claim dominance. They could no longer rely on fear or authority. Humanity had arrived, precise, deliberate, and unstoppable, and the consequences were clear. The old order had ended, and the galaxy was entering a new era, defined by a force the Council had underestimated for far too long. The humans had arrived, their fleets now firmly positioned in the system, demonstrating their overwhelming control and precision. The Council, once confident in its power, now faced a reality that could not be denied. Humanity's message had been clear from the start. They were not here for petty conquest or reckless destruction. They were here to enforce consequences, to correct long-standing injustices, and to establish a new balance in the galaxy. For days, the Council attempted to maintain order, reviewing strategies and debating the next steps. But every report that came in highlighted the futility of resistance. Human ships moved with efficiency that no Council fleet could match. Automated defense systems, once considered state-of-the-art, were neutralized before they could even react. Even the most advanced weaponry and strategic maneuvers were rendered ineffective by the humans. Careful planning and foresight. The Council chambers were quiet now, a stark contrast to the constant debates that had filled them before. Members whispered in small groups, reviewing reports, trying to comprehend the full scale of human capability. Fear was no longer hidden. It was open and undeniable. The Council realized that the humans were not just strong, they were disciplined, intelligent, and patient, and they operated with a sense of purpose that surpassed anything the Council had ever faced. Outside, human fleets continued their calculated advance. Small squads of ships moved to survey planets, scanning for resources and potential threats, all while leaving civilian populations untouched. Every movement reinforced the humans' reputation for precision and restraint. They were not reckless conquerors. They were enforcers of principle, and their presence alone was enough to make the Council reconsider every assumption it had ever held. One senior member of the Council finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "We cannot fight them. Every move we have made has failed to slow them down. They anticipate our strategies. They adapt faster than we can react, and their coordination is unmatched. We must consider a different approach, one that does not rely on force alone." Others nodded slowly, understanding the truth that had become impossible to ignore. Humanity's advance was not just about power, it was about strategy, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively when the time was right. The Council had always relied on authority, tradition, and control, but these tools were meaningless against a force that combined patience, planning, and principle in ways they could not counter. For the first time, the council seriously considered surrender not as a sign of weakness, but as a practical response to an unstoppable force. They began drafting messages of compliance, outlining changes to oppressive systems, dismantling unjust structures, and submitting to oversight as demanded by the humans. Even then, fear persisted. The humans were disciplined and principled. Yes, but the council knew that failure to meet their expectations in full could bring catastrophic consequences. Meanwhile, human teams began moving on the ground. They appeared silently on key planets, establishing temporary command posts and coordinating logistics. They did not harm civilians, nor did they destroy infrastructure. Instead, they demonstrated control with minimal disruption, showing that their goal was not chaos, but order. Observers from the council watched in disbelief as humans neutralized potential threats quickly and efficiently, often without firing a single weapon. The council's fleets, now mostly sidelined, were forced to observe. Attempts to engage the humans directly had failed repeatedly, and any remaining confidence in military might had evaporated. Council members whispered about the humans' intelligence, discipline, and clarity of purpose. "We have never faced an opponent like this," one said. "They are not just stronger or faster, they are smarter, more organized, and they move with absolute purpose." Across multiple sectors, the same pattern emerged. Human fleets had moved beyond the first system, establishing control without unnecessary confrontation. They were methodical, precise, and careful. Planets were stabilized, supply lines secured, and potential threats neutralized, all without causing unnecessary casualties. The Council could no longer ignore the lesson being demonstrated. Intelligence, discipline, and patience could overpower brute force and outdated strategies. The Council held emergency sessions to reassess their priorities. Old alliances were reconsidered, outdated doctrines were questioned, and every decision was weighed against the humans' capabilities. Fear, respect, and a grudging admiration filled the room. Humanity had arrived and demonstrated that control was not measured by numbers alone. It was measured by strategy, foresight, and the ability to act with precision under pressure. As days passed, the humans continued to assert control. Systems previously considered safe or neutral were now integrated into their strategic network. Supply lines moved smoothly, threats were neutralized efficiently, and communications were monitored and coordinated with remarkable precision. The Council's attempts to regain initiative failed repeatedly, leaving them no choice but to follow the humans' lead, even in the council chambers, where pride and tradition had long held sway. A sense of inevitability settled over the members. The humans were not going to leave. They were not here to negotiate endlessly or test limits. They were here to enforce a new order, and the Council had to comply if it wanted to survive. The lesson was clear. Underestimating humanity had been the gravest mistake the galaxy had ever made. The observer, standing quietly in the back of the chamber, spoke softly. They do not act recklessly. They do not destroy without reason. They enforce consequences with intelligence, patience, and principle. We can survive this if we accept their terms, cooperate, and learn from their approach. Council members nodded, finally beginning to grasp the scale of the human advantage. Resistance was no longer an option. Survival depended on adaptation, compliance, and recognition of human intelligence and authority. The humans had shown that they were not just powerful, they were disciplined, fair, and deliberate, and any attempt to oppose them would bring disaster. As the humans established their control, the Council began implementing the demanded changes. Systems that had been oppressive were reformed. Supply chains were redirected to prevent exploitation. Oversight mechanisms were established, ensuring that fairness and balance were maintained. Humanity's presence forced the Council to confront its own failures, to reconsider old priorities, and to adopt a new approach to governance. For the first time in generations, the Council members felt both fear and relief. Fear, because humans were unmatched in discipline, intelligence, and strategy. Relief, because their approach was not reckless or destructive. They were principled, measured, and focused on justice rather than chaos. Humanity had arrived as a force of consequence, not annihilation, and the Council now had a chance to survive. By following the guidance they provided, the final phase of human intervention began with direct communication. Humans outlined clear expectations, timelines, and consequences. They were precise, methodical, and patient, ensuring that every Council member understood the stakes. The message was simple: comply, reform, and cooperate, and there would be no unnecessary destruction. Resist, delay, or deceive, and consequences would follow swiftly and decisively. The Council had no choice but to comply. Orders were sent to all systems to implement reforms, dismantle oppressive mechanisms, and cooperate with human oversight. Military fleets were instructed to stand down, and civilian populations were assured that the humans would protect them. Slowly, the Council began to see that survival was possible, but only if humanity's terms were met completely. As the humans completed their operations, a new sense of order emerged. Systems once chaotic or mismanaged now functioned with efficiency. Supply lines were secure, resources were allocated fairly, and oversight ensured compliance with human directives. The Council, once in control, now operated under guidance, but in doing so, it recognized the wisdom and discipline of the humans who had arrived. For the first time in generations, the galaxy experienced a balance it had never seen. Humanity had enforced justice, order, and consequence without unnecessary destruction. They had demonstrated strength, intelligence, and discipline, showing that power could be wielded with principle rather than fear. In the Council chambers, members reflected on the lessons learned. Fear had forced them to act, but respect and understanding had shaped their survival. They now recognized that humanity was not just a military power. They were a force of intelligence, discipline, and principle that had transformed the galaxy. Without unnecessary chaos. The observer, watching the Council, smiled quietly. Humanity had arrived, not as reckless conquerors, but as precise, disciplined enforcers of consequence. They had shown that survival, strength, and respect could coexist when guided by intelligence and principle. The Council had survived, but the galaxy had changed forever. Human fleets, now positioned across key systems, remained vigilant but calm. They had achieved their goals with minimal destruction, ensuring that life could continue, systems could function, and balance could be maintained. Their arrival had demonstrated a truth the galaxy could no longer ignore. Intelligence, patience, and discipline could overcome any obstacle, and humanity had become a force that could not be underestimated again. In the end, the Council realized a profound truth. The era of